Hello, welcome to the Inspiring Women in Travel Asia series, also known as IWTA. I'm Gary Bauman from the Southeast Asia Travel Show, and I'm guest hosting this edition with Emily Chang, who's CEO of McCann World Group in China. Emily's career resume is filled with inspiring achievements and experiences, so I'm really looking forward to hearing a great deal more over the next half an hour. So firstly, let's welcome Emily. Hi, Emily. How are you doing today? And how's Shanghai?
Wonderful. Shanghai's getting hot. We're starting to unlock, which is wonderful. And we're doing great. Thanks.
That's great to hear. So firstly, Emily, let's talk about your current role. Your current role is as CEO in China of McCann World Group. Just tell us a little bit more about what that actually means.
Sure. I look after 3 agencies. McCann, as you may know it from the TV show Mad Men. We've got MRM, which is McCann Relationship Marketing. It's a digital and social technology agency. And then we've got Craft, which is a digital production house. I have the opportunity to look after all 3 of these agencies. Our home base is in Shanghai. We've got offices in Beijing and Guangzhou. And it's a wonderful, wonderful group of people that I love serving every day.
So you mentioned there that you're based in Shanghai, you have offices in Beijing and Guangzhou. China's a huge country, so I'm imagining this role involves quite a lot of travel.
Actually, we haven't been traveling very much in Shanghai, as you know, since you used to live here. So not really. But what I would say is, on a different track, this role in many ways reminds me of my chief commercial officer role at IHG. And some people are surprised to hear it, but I think there are a lot of parallels there because it's all about change management. It's about very aggressive growth targets. It's about demonstrating agility. We're looking after different brands every day, different priorities, different hotel owner issues, lots of complexities, and a variety of business models. And I think fundamentally being in the service industry is something that fits really well with the way that I like to lead and operate. So it works really well for me. And it often reminds me of the days, very, very fond days of working at IHG.
Great parallels there. The creative industry landscape is dynamic and it's changing very, very fast in a country like China. Can you just tell us a little bit more about what the excitement is of working in this industry right now?
I think it's incredibly exciting. So I was on what we call the client side for over 2 decades. And I always wanted an agency partner that I struggled to find in its entirety. So I have the opportunity to put my money where my mouth is and become that agency, which to me encapsulates the old and the new. In the excitement of Metaverse and NFTs, I feel we can't lose sight of our goal, which is ultimately to help brands earn a meaningful role in consumers' lives. It's about building human connection through engagement, and nothing more tangible than an actual hotel, for instance. That's the what, but then there's also the how, which is all about the new. Everything is constantly changing, and being able to understand digital technology, data, and how it underpins everything we do is really critical to make sure that we can deliver against the what, against our goals.
Yeah, you mentioned that obviously the high level of technical excellence in China. You mentioned metaverses, these kinds of things. Are brands moving in that direction? Do you have to sort of slow them down a little bit? That's where they want to go right now?
I think everyone's interested to learn, and that's a good thing. I think everyone's interested to try, but I think we always have to ask ourselves, why? Why are we doing this? Is it because I just want to try metaverse? Or is it because it'll help me achieve my end objective? Does it help me create a more meaningful experience and a relationship, a connectivity with the person that I'm seeking to serve? If the answer is yes, then that's probably a great route to take. If the answer is no, then maybe it's a shiny toy that I need to put on the side for now.
Yeah, that's a great answer. So I stalked you on LinkedIn. I looked at your career record, Emily, and you describe yourself, this is a great description, as a bicultural and bilingual, meaningful understanding and successful bridge building between Chinese and US cultures. Now, that is probably more important than ever right now, but you've been doing this for quite a long time. How has that sort of changed over the years?
Well, growing up as the child of immigrants, I learned to become a productive bridge early on. And frankly, it's something I really enjoy doing, which is helping one side see the perspective of the other side. And, generally what I found is intentions are good. And frankly, broader goals are more aligned than we think. However, what can often get in the way is cultural misunderstanding, perhaps what's not said in our assumptions, and actually in our vocabulary. So being able to convey sort of one idea across the ocean helps global teams feel local teams understand and respect the business goals and the brand remit of global. Meanwhile, also able to help local teams feel valued and appreciated for their market expertise and what they do every day on the ground.
Yeah, that's a great answer too. So let's go back a little bit in time, Emily. I looked at your career record and your educational record, and you first studied for a degree in biology at the University of Rochester School of Medicine and Dentistry. What were your career ambitions back at that time?
Well, Gary, can I pause and say you are an excellent stalker?
I'm experienced, Emily.
No, it's wonderful. Actually, it feels like we already know each other. My background was in biology. I wanted to be a pediatric oncologist because I had this pivotal moment when I was in the 7th grade. I was talking to my daughter about this because she's just graduated 8th grade. And I said, from your age on, I knew I wanted to be a pediatric oncologist because I saw this really poorly executed bedside manner that really hurt a little kid. And I remember in that moment, I thought I can do it better than that. Of course, I went into pre-med, I even got into med school, but then I realized that the things that call to our heart don't always have to become our professional occupation, right? So the things that we care about and the things that draw us could become side passions. So while I wanted to be a pediatric oncologist, I wrote this book, The Spare Room. It's allowed us in a very different way to care for vulnerable and hurt children by inviting them into our personal home. Meanwhile, I do something very different in my professional life, which I actually completely love as well.
Yeah, so your career has taken many different directions, and you mentioned the book. We'll also talk about in a moment there. But after some 16 years later, you completed 2 executive programs at Harvard in the US and INSEAD as well. What inspired you to undertake those 2 academic programs after quite a large gap?
Well, I think it's about constant learning. Whenever we start feeling complacent or confident that we're sort of in charge and in control of our daily work, that makes me really nervous because we should never be complacent and we should never feel like we're at our best, because we're not. And that to me is a misconception. So I look for opportunities to learn. I remember the Harvard program was leading change and organizational renewal. It's called LCORE. And I signed up for it with my boss, Kenneth McPherson's support, because we were driving such a big change management agenda in hospitality and changing something that is so traditional and rooted in older ways of working. I thought there must be a lot I don't know. So let me go after a course that can help educate me on the things that maybe I'm not aware of. Same thing later on, I was doing sort of CEO preparation work. So the INSEAD had a 9-month course for C-level. And I thought there might be a lot here that will be taught that I haven't, again, had the opportunity to make myself aware of. So just proactively looking for new educational opportunities and ways to learn things that I haven't learned before. Gary, I think you're on mute.
Sorry. So that's interesting, Emily. So let's dig a little bit deeper into your role as Chief Commercial Officer for Intercontinental Hotels, which you referenced there. The period was between 2014 and 2017, which was a really interesting period in global travel. There was a lot of growth, there was a lot of expansion. What did you learn particularly from that period in that role?
I loved that job. And I love hospitality and travel. A couple of things I learned. The first is, we always say this, but really everything is about people. I talked earlier about how do we balance the old and the new? How do we find people who are passionate about service and value tradition, yet they also understand how to pivot into the future? So it's really all about the right people in leadership, when fundamentally what you offer is not the box, it's not the brand on the front, it's the people and the service and the connection we create with the people, the guests who are willing to trust us with their most intimate moments. The second thing is, on the flip opposite side of people is data. Data helps us understand who we're serving, who we might have the opportunity to serve, and how to do that with excellence. And then I guess the third piece that bridges those two is communication. because we have to be able to communicate effectively our desires and what we seek to serve for our consumers, for our guests. We also need to communicate with the broader organization. You know, when you include the on-property teams, we had over 5,200 people in sales and marketing. How do we help everyone know where we're headed, how we're going to get there, and what our priorities are? So constant communication, the underpinning of data to inform our decisions, and finding the right people would probably be my 3 key points.
Yeah, the communication challenge there is huge. From there, you moved on to another blue chip company. You became CMO of Starbucks in China, again, at another very interesting time commercially. That was a fast changing sector, particularly in the mid 2010s. What enticed you to take that role at that time?
Well, being in hospitality, one of the things I learned is, you know, this old and new idea. Hospitality is probably one of the oldest industries ever, and yet the most forward-looking from an e-commerce standpoint. When we think e-commerce, we often think Amazon, Taobao, these types of brands, but actually hospitality was the first to really put their offering online at large, right? That's how we book. So there was so much to learn in digital connectivity, in online platforms, in third party, we call OTAs, online travel agencies. Starbucks, when they came to me with the job offer, I thought, I can learn so much from them. Their loyalty program is best in class. I've been sort of investigating it in my free time to see what we can learn anyway. The loyalty program, the digital program. And what was also exciting was the chance to learn. Once again, there's an underlying theme there because we were opening the first roastery outside of Seattle. And it was such a big space, over 30,000 square feet. It had 2 floors, 5 coffee bars, and it's a manufacturing site. So you have to leverage technology to create a great guest experience. We also stood up delivery. So we had the opportunity to create the Starbucks delivery program, everything from naming it, Zhuanxing, which is the Chinese name, to actually operationalizing and bringing this online and offline integrated experience to life.
Wow, a pretty full-on role there, looking at all things of distribution. You mentioned that the roastery itself was also a manufacturing site. That's pretty unusual, I guess.
It was such a great experience to figure out how to create this amazing experience. And I think one of the things I got quoted a lot for saying was it really felt like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory meets something from the future, grounded in coffee.
and how was it? How did consumers respond to it? Because it was as you said, it was an international innovation at the time. It happened in China. This first roastery. How did consumers respond?
They loved it. We had people queued up outside for hours, and it was a real responsibility, whether it was at Apple in the old days when we had people queuing to buy new product, or whether it was hospitality where we really felt so trusted by our guests to give them support and service in the most important moments of their life. You know, you think about the weddings that happen in hotels, or even just the fact that you're trusting me and sleeping in our bed tonight. For me, all of this is part of the experience. And when people are queuing up to try and experience the Starbucks roastery, that is also something we are really, really cautious of. You and I were just talking before we started recording about the temperatures in Shanghai. It can be very hot. It can be very rainy. So when people are waiting for hours just to experience our space, everything to me matters. All the details matter about how somebody is waiting, how they feel valued, how they feel rewarded and validated when they finally get into this space to say, yep, that was worth the wait.
Details matter. I guess that's one of the most important things I've learned working in travel and tourism over the last 20 years or so. But let's bring things up a little bit closer to the present, Emily. I read a recent interview with you in which you discussed your early pandemic experiences, which were pretty unique. Tell us a little bit more about what happened there.
Well, in the second Shanghai lockdown, 2022, it was different than all previous lockdowns because it was only intended for a couple of days and went on for up to 90 days for some folks. And, you know, people don't have a lot of food stored in their homes. There wasn't access to food delivery. So we really went down to the base of Maslow's pyramid, the hierarchy of needs, and kind of got to the point where our people didn't have food to eat in their homes. And it brought out a new level of leadership of consideration for our people. How do we make sure they're fed? How do we make sure they're okay, they're mentally well? How do we care for them, engage, understand, and equally importantly, let them know we're doing all of those things? Because it's one thing to consider, how do I get food to people? It's another to let them know this is in progress. I think that's the thing that really resonated the most to me, because it's not only learning new skills. You know, my head of HR became a logistics expert in getting food. My CFO became personally invested in helping those young people who work for us who don't have kitchens get access to self-heating meals. All of us just rolled up our sleeves and said, how do we as leaders serve the people that we have the opportunity to serve and make sure they're okay?
Fascinating, fascinating times. I followed it quite closely. I lived in Shanghai. I've still got a lot of friends and colleagues that are living there. So I followed everything that happened. And it really was very, very difficult times. We've endured lockdowns here in the rest of Asia and other parts of the world. But the one in Shanghai really resonated very much with local communities, because people did rally together, didn't they, in a way that perhaps they haven't for quite a long time.
It was amazing. Communities had to come together out of need because we had these things called group buys. And unless you can hit a minimum order quantity, you can't access food. So people had to look around and figure out who was here, who might join me in a group order. Then we found other ways to support each other. So for instance, in my little neighborhood, I live in one of the smaller ones. We've never had a case here, knock on wood. And therefore, for most of this time, we were actually allowed out of our house, which many were basically under house arrest. We were allowed out in a small area. And people were talking about how that we couldn't go to the gym, we couldn't go for runs. So I raised my hand and volunteered to teach exercise classes. And so I got to know my neighbors really well. We sweated together 4 times a week, early mornings. I think those types of initiatives, I wasn't the only one. People found ways to serve each other. Somebody else, her husband works at a chocolate production facility, and she had all this chocolate in the fridge. So one day she just opened up the doors and said, everybody who wants chocolate. That was definitely something nobody could access at that point. All the neighbors ran in and, well, not ran in, but, you know, came at different times with their masks on and all helped themselves to chocolate. So I feel really, really grateful for the neighborhood that I was in, because it wasn't always sunshine and roses, but in our case, we found ways to just raise our hand, find needs and meet them for each other.
Fascinating. And what's the current situation for you, Emily? Are you able to get to the office? Can you take the subway? Are stores open? What's the current situation of living?
Most stores are open, many malls are not, most restaurants are not. Offices are open with generally requiring every 24 hours or up to 72 hours COVID tests. So we're taking tests every day. A lot of our folks, once there's a case identified, they're still locked down and the clock restarts at 14 days. For us, like I said, I'm still able to go to the office. What I've done with my 3 key leaders is we're rotating. So no one's in the office all together at the same time, just in case we all do get locked down in the office. So we have 2 in the office at one time, and today's my day at home. At the end of June, we believe all the policies will sort of stabilize, and then we plan to be much more in the office. But I will also say, Gary, this has given us a great opportunity to reconsider hybrid work. Some of the things that we may have been a little bit more hesitant to try, we've had to out of necessity. So now we have a pretty good sense of what works, what doesn't work, which teams. You know, one of the things I'd mentioned early on is this job reminds me of hospitality because businesses are really different. You know, how you run a limited service hotel versus how you run a 5-star luxury hotel, the operating model is completely different. And we have very different partnerships with different client brands. So some teams might be able to work at home more than 50% of the time. There's one group we're saying, if you guys want to work at home all the time, we're open. Let's figure out how to make that happen. And then there are some who really say, look, we really love working together. We find that we're most productive when we're together. So we'd really like to be in the office every day. So just having that degree of flexibility and the transparent conversation, I think will put us in a better place. And also importantly, help our people feel so heard and valued that we are here to create the model that works best for them.
It's a really refreshing perspective to hear that after coming through such a difficult time, Emily. I want to talk a little bit now. You referred a little bit earlier to your book, The Spare Room. So I want to talk a little bit more about what was the concept and how did you write it?
Well, it's interesting. We're talking about travel right now. One of my greatest loves is hospitality. And fundamentally, we have had unusually 17 kids living in our spare room over the last 22 years. They've each come to us through a different way. And when you open up your spare room, it really is just hospitality. You think about it. Your spare room's sitting there. It's got some dusty yoga mats, maybe an old television. You're paying for the real estate. You're paying the electricity anyway. All you're doing is opening up that space for somebody who needs exactly that thing. So I started off thinking some of the stories that we've witnessed, whether they are abused children, child brides, a daughter of a prostitute, and watching their transformation as they come into our home and heal has been extraordinary. It's just been life's greatest privilege. But as I started to interrogate the idea, whether it was through doing a TED Talk on it or whether it was working with my publisher, I realized there's a deeper story here to tell. It's not just encouraging everyone to open their spare room, because maybe the gift of hospitality is not your thing. But what we all have is a euphemistic spare room. So we came down and distilled it into this simple model. On one side, you have your offer. For me, it is hospitality. It is a unified family. It is space in our home. It can be other resources you have available, experiences, capabilities. On the other hand, you have I call it your offense, or perhaps your opportunity. So what is the thing that calls to you more than anything else? So whether it was because I was so drawn to hurt children that I wanted to study biology and become a doctor, or whether it is ocean plastics or animal abuse, or whatever your offense is, once you articulate your offer and your offense, when you find the intersection of those two things, I call it your social legacy. Legacy being how you leave something better than you found it, and social defining the space in which you have that impact. So I think everyone has a social legacy, and I'm convinced of it after having written the book, because I interviewed so many people to tell their stories, and everybody keeps reaching out and saying, I want to tell you about my social legacy. Here's something my family has done, or here's something I want to do. How do I get started? So for me, it's not just a book. It's not just a collection of stories or even, workshop exercises that help you define your own. To me, what I deeply hope is it becomes a movement, where people, as they used to ask each other, how are you paying it forward? I would love it if one day they ask each other, what's your spare room?
That's fascinating. We can see the book there in the background, but writing a book and then turning it into a TED Talk, it's slightly different. You have to adapt the way that you're telling the stories. How did you adapt the knowledge and the experiences that you gained and everything that you've learned and create that into a TED Talk?
It was such a gift because it was not quite sequentially in that order. I started writing the book on weekends, and then I was talking about it at a dinner party one night. And the woman I sat next to, her name is Lenore, she wrote a wonderful book about the educational system in China. And she said, have you considered doing a TED Talk? And then it turns out the woman sitting opposite me at dinner was the one who coordinated Shanghai TEDx. So I said, all right, I'll put the book on the back burner and let me tell the stories, because what I feel compelled to do is tell the stories, not necessarily write a book. So by going through the TEDx process, and I think there's so much TEDx now that the process varies. I've done 3, and the process has been very different for all 3. But the first one, I'm very grateful, was the entire 9-month process. It forced me to really interrogate, what is my idea worth sharing? And that's when I started unpacking and realizing there is this model of offer and offense. And I realized that it's really more of a call to action than an anthology of stories. And for that, I'm very grateful, because after the TEDx talk, I kind of just assumed the project is sort of done. But in the next year or 2 that followed, I still felt this sort of pull to write the book. And, I've never written, really. I've never published a book. I don't know how any of it works. So it was sort of a leap of faith in many ways to say, well, if I feel this much of a desire or sort of calling to do it, let's give it some time and space. So our family agreed I would take a 1-year sabbatical. We called it #professional halftime, and I would pursue the book project. And come what may, if it doesn't get published, that's okay, because I took the year and wrote it. And if it does, then great.
Professional halftime, I love that. So looking back across your career, your student days, you mentioned bridging China and the US, all these different experiences you've had. Travel has clearly played an important part in your professional life and also in your personal life. What does travel mean to you?
I love to travel. It means so much to me, and it's so important, I believe. I grew up swinging around the backseat of a station wagon on road trips in America. We didn't have a lot of money when I was growing up, nor did we have mandatory safety belts. But as I started traveling, when I entered the workforce, something just really came to me. Traveling is not about taking a selfie in front of a monument. Traveling is about experiences. And I think the more that we travel, the more we remember how small we are and how big the world is. And that perspective is invaluable. Now with a teenager, it's really important to me to give her those same experiences. We still have a list. We want to go see and feel the bioluminescent worms in the water. We want to go to the Gobi Desert. We want to see Yemen, Croatia. There are still so many experiences I think are worth having, because again, they remind us that the world is so big and that there's so much more experience, culture, perspective out there that we don't understand.
Totally agree with that. And I guess one of the things that has really come into focus, perhaps for all of us, more than ever over the past 2.5 years, is how big the world is, but how important sustainability is, how important protecting the planet will be going forward. Now, you posted recently on World Ocean Day about an initiative called Cut the Strap. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh, yes. I totally believe we have to care about the world that we live in. I want to leave it as minimally damaged as possible for my child. That doesn't sound very optimistic, but it is what it is. Social legacy, as I just explained, is about leaving things better than we found them. And one thing we realized, everyone's wearing masks. I learned all of this crazy information. Do you know that there are more masks in our ocean today than there are jellyfish? Billions of masks are floating in the ocean. And what's happening is those straps are getting caught in seabirds' feet. They're getting tangled, they're choking ocean life. And there's just something very simple we can do besides making sure we're disposing of masks responsibly, recognizing for whatever reason, most of them are still ending up in the ocean, cut the strap. It's something so simple to do, but then we can avoid so much of that damage to ocean life. And so we decided to do something proactive. Oh, I've got it right here. So we created a Cut the Strap initiative for our own team. And we basically built a sustainable bag that holds 21 masks. Why 21? Because, well, some don't agree, but it takes at least 21 days to develop a new habit that sticks. So every day you have a new mask that McCann has given to you, and oh, this one is used, and therefore I will go and cut it next. We kind of created a little McCann World Group logo, and we remind even on the mask to cut the strap. So I'll do it right now as we talk. You just rip the strap. And we've been telling everybody on social media. And you know what's wonderful is we've given them to clients, we've given them to whoever's interested on WeChat. If you reach out, we'll give you one of these too. And it's gotten a lot of recognition in China in the market because you know what? I think it's authentic. We did this because we think it's the right thing to do. And while we have a platform with hundreds of employees, we'll start here. But what's wonderful is if it's something simple, meaningful, and relevant, it does start to take off.
That's a remarkable initiative and very creative as well. Congratulations on that, Emily. I think that's great. Let's hope that that gets take up around the world, because I think that's a fabulous idea. Speaking to you today, Emily, I've learned so much. I've got so many takeaways from your career and your perspectives and the social legacy, particularly the concept that you talked about. Personally, when you look back over your life and your career, you know, what advice would you now give to that young Emily Chang studying for a biology degree all those years ago? What would you say you've learned the most?
I would tell her, girl, you just don't know. I think the world is so big, and we start off, the younger we are, the more defined we are in our space and what we think we know and want to do. But I would say to all young people, that caring heart's going to take you places. Almost certainly not the places you expect. But if you keep your mind open and you keep your heart full, you can find such deep fulfillment in your personal and professional life. And you know, we only have this one life to live. So why not live it to the fullest?
Great, that's a perfect answer. And just one final follow-up to that. We're halfway through 2022. What are your aspirations and your hopes for the rest of the year?
Well, first, the Spare Room book is slowly being made into a film. So that's very exciting. I would like to see where that goes. The second thing is when I look at McCann World Group, we are undertaking a massive change transformation, and we are well underway. I'm so proud of the work that our team has done. Similar to travel and leisure, we have very unique industry KPIs. and I'm continuing to track how we're doing across the hard and the soft metrics. I'm so proud of our leadership team. So my deepest goal is across all metrics that people are thriving by the end of this year, that this leadership team is solid, that they love their job, that they feel so convinced they've made the right choice, and that we're in it together.
Well, Emily, the very, very best of luck with the movie version, the film version. I can't wait to hear more about that in the coming weeks and months. And also the very, very best of luck for the second half of this year with fulfilling those goals in your business. And thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Thank you for your time, Gary. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Emily. Goodbye.